Have you ever watched a mother run barefoot through the dark, carrying more than fear in her arms? Have you ever seen a woman choose hunger over safety, silence over shame, just to protect her children? What would you do if every door in town closed on you and the only sound left was your children crying in the dark? That night, the rain didn't fall, it attacked. Sheets of water slammed against the small wooden house where Mary lived. Inside, a chair crashed, a plate shattered, and a man's voice, deep, angry, filled the room. Mary had learned to live with anger. But that night, it went too far. She held her youngest boy, little Sam, close to her chest. Her two older sons, Eli and Daniel, hid behind a broken cupboard, their eyes wide, not in fear, but in something worse, familiarity. They had seen this before. The bottle hit the wall again. "Useless woman," her husband shouted. Mary didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just waited. Waited for the thunder outside to cover the sound of her decision. When the next lightning flash came, she moved. Fast, silent, purposeful. She grabbed a small cloth bag, one piece of bread, an old photograph, and the last 3 coins she had. She looked once at the man slumped in anger, then whispered to her boys, "Get your shoes. Don't say a word." What? Out into the storm they went, barefoot, soaked, but free. Because every step she took was one step away from fear. Have you ever tried running with 3 children in the dark? Every sound becomes a threat, every shadow a question. The youngest cried, the middle one stumbled, but Mary didn't stop, because something inside her, something wild, something ancient, refused to die. They reached the edge of the woods by dawn. The storm had passed, but the cold hadn't. Her boys huddled together, teeth chattering. Mary tore the bottom of her skirt, wrapping it around their feet. Then she whispered, "We're safe now, my loves. We're safe." Safe. She wanted that word to be true so badly it almost felt real, but she knew better. Safety doesn't come easy to poor women. Not in that town, not anywhere. As daylight crept through the trees, she found an old wooden shack, half rotten, half standing. It wasn't much, but it had a roof and 4 walls that didn't shout at her. She laid her boys on the wooden floor and kissed each forehead. Then she looked up at the cracked ceiling and whispered, "Lord, give me strength. I don't ask for much, just one more day." And with hunger came the hardest question of all. What does a mother feed her children when there's nothing left to give? Mary searched the forest, digging through soil, gathering wild roots she barely recognized. She found a few mushrooms, a handful of berries, and a small stream nearby. She boiled water in an old tin can and made what she called forest soup. It smelled like smoke and sadness, but when her boys ate, their eyes softened. It wasn't much, but it was enough. As night fell again, Eli, the eldest, looked at her and asked, "Mama, are we going to live here now?" Mary smiled faintly. "For a while," she said, "but don't be afraid of the forest." "Yeah. It's kinder than people sometimes," he nodded. And that night, as the wind sang through the trees, Mary sat outside the shack, barefoot, hair wet, her hands raw from work, and watched the stars appear one by one. Each one reminded her of something she used to have, light, warmth, hope. But she wasn't broken. She was becoming. Because that's what hardship does to a mother. It doesn't destroy her. It carves her into something unshakable. One breath, one prayer, one small victory at a time. Days turned into weeks. The forest became home. She built a small fire pit, taught her boys how to fish with strings and sticks. Every morning began with the same promise whispered to the rising sun, "We'll make it through. Somehow. We'll make it through." And sometimes, late at night, she would look toward the distant town lights and wonder, would anyone remember her name? Would her husband even care that she was gone? Would her boys grow up hating the world or learning to survive it? One night, as the fire crackled low, Eli said softly, "Mama, why did you leave him?" Mary stared into the flames for a long time before answering. "Because one day, my son, I want you to remember your mother smiling, not hiding." That was the first time Eli saw tears on her face. Not of sadness, but relief. The kind that only comes when chains finally break. From that night on, Mary was no longer a runaway. She was a builder, a teacher, a mother carving a new world out of ashes and soil. And though she didn't know it yet, one of those little boys, the one watching the stars and dreaming of a city, would one day bring the light back to her doorstep. But that's a story for another night. For now, all that matters is this. Even when the world turns its back on you, a mother's heart keeps walking forward, through fear, through hunger, through storm, because hope always finds its way home. Have you ever watched a woman build a life from almost nothing? No money, no help, no one to call, just her hands, her faith, and 3 little mouths waiting for her voice in the morning? The forest had its moods, kind some days, cruel the next. Mary learned to listen to it, the way a sailor listens to waves. The rustling leaves told her when rain was coming. The silence warned her when wolves were near. And the soil taught her patience. Every sunrise meant one thing. Survival wasn't a dream anymore. It was her job. She cooked with smoke, washed clothes in cold river water, traded wild berries with travelers who passed through. She didn't ask for charity, she offered what she could. That's how she earned her name in the nearby village, the Wild Mother. Some said it with kindness, others with mockery. But she didn't mind. She'd rather be wild than broken. Her boys grew strong. Eli, the eldest, learned to fish and fix broken nets. Daniel, curious and bold, trapped small animals for food. Little Sam followed Mary everywhere, tugging her skirt, watching her hands as she cooked over fire. He used to say, "Mama, the smoke makes you look like an angel." Mary would laugh softly, "Maybe an old one." One winter, the river froze early. No fish, no roots, no trade. Mary tore old shirts into pieces to make socks for her boys. Her hands bled from the cold. And when Daniel got sick, fever burning his small body, she stayed up 3 nights straight, feeding him soup made of herbs and prayers. There was a moment that winter when she almost gave up. She looked at her cracked fingers, her hollow cheeks, her reflection in the frozen water, and whispered, "Maybe they'd be better off without me." But then, Eli woke up in the middle of that night, saw her crying by the fire, and quietly covered her shoulders with the old blanket she'd given him. He didn't say a word. He just sat beside her, watching the flames together. That's when she realized her boys weren't just surviving because of her. She was surviving because of them. By spring, the fever broke. Daniel laughed again, running through the tall grass barefoot, and Mary thanked heaven for another season. She began to plant small patches of beans and corn near the shack. The soil was stubborn, like her, but it listened eventually. Every sprout was a promise. We're not done yet. Years rolled on like river stones. The boys grew taller, louder, hungrier. Mary's hair began to show silver in the sunlight. Her hands, once soft, were strong and scarred. But she was proud of those scars. They were proof she had fought life and still stood. Eli began to change. At 16, his eyes were already older than his age. He'd watch the smoke from their fire curl up toward the mountains and say, "Mama, do you ever wonder what's beyond those hills?" Mary would smile. "I used to, before life gave me more questions than answers. But I want to see it," he'd whisper. "I want to earn money, build something big." She didn't stop him from dreaming, because a mother knows to cage a dream is to break a child. Still, every time he talked about leaving, her chest tightened just a little. Fear and pride tangled together. Two feelings only mothers truly understand. The villagers still whispered when she came to trade. "That's the woman who ran from her man. Still living out there like a stray dog. She's raising thieves in the woods." She'd just smile, hand them their berries, take her few coins, and walk back through the dust road, head high, back straight. Because dignity, she learned, doesn't need an address. Have you ever seen someone make miracles out of monotony? That was Mary's gift. She could take a handful of roots and turn it into dinner, a broken tin can and turn it into a cooking pot, a single smile from her sons and turn it into the strength to go one more day. But hardship doesn't end quietly. One summer, a fire spread through the woods. Lightning struck a dry patch near the creek, and within minutes the forest roared. Mary grabbed what she could, her boys, their blankets, the small sack of coins, and ran until her legs gave out. They watched the smoke swallow everything they had built. The shack, the garden, the memories. When the fire died, the forest was nothing but ash and silence. And still, Mary said, "We'll rebuild." Her voice cracked, but her will did not. They did rebuild. Not because they had to, but because they didn't know how to quit. Eli helped cut new wood from surviving trees. Daniel gathered stones to mark the fire pit again, and Mary, tired but determined, said, "Maybe the fire didn't destroy us. Maybe it burned away our fear." And in that moment, under the open sky, they laughed, a laughter so raw it almost sounded like tears. Time kept moving. Eli turned 18. He'd grown tall, strong, and restless. One evening, he told Mary he wanted to leave for the city, not to escape, but to make something of himself. Her heart broke quietly, but she nodded. "Go, just promise me you'll come back when you've made peace with the world." Eli hugged her tight, whispered, "I'll come back for you, Mama." "I swear it." That night, as he walked away down the dirt path, the moonlight followed him, and Mary's tears fell silently on the earth that had once fed them. After he left, the shack felt different, empty but proud, like a bird's nest after the first one flies. Mary turned to her younger two, smiled softly, and said, "Looks like it's just us now." "Let's keep the fire going. He'll need the light to find his way home." Because that's what mothers do. They keep the fire alive, even when it burns alone. They keep hope steady even when the world forgets their name, and they teach their children how to rise from nothing until nothing becomes everything. Years would pass before that promise was fulfilled. But Mary didn't need proof. She had faith, the kind that grows from roots deeper than hunger, stronger than pain, and brighter than any storm. Because sometimes the hardest life builds the strongest hearts, and Mary's heart was still beating wild. Have you ever waited for someone for so long that the waiting itself became a part of who you are? Have you ever watched the seasons change, the trees grow and shed, the fire fade and rise, and still believe someone would come home? Eli was gone. His promise still echoed in the walls of the little shack. "I'll come back for you, Mama." At first, his absence felt temporary, like a sunrise delayed by clouds. Mary still set 4 plates for dinner. She still listened for his footsteps at dusk. And each time the wind rustled through the trees, she looked up, half expecting to see him there, tall, grinning, carrying stories from the city. But time has its own way of breaking things quietly. Days became months. Months turned into years. The letters came, at first. Simple, hopeful notes written in shaky handwriting. "Mama, I found work at a shop. Mama, I'm saving money. I'll send some soon. Mama, don't worry, I'm doing good." She read each one until the paper frayed. She'd fold them carefully and keep them in a small tin box under her bed, her treasure chest of words. But then, one day, the letters stopped. No explanation, no goodbye. Just silence. The kind that stretches across years and keeps a mother awake long after the fire dies. Mary didn't cry the day the letters stopped. She just sat by the door, watching Daniel and Sam chase fireflies, and whispered to herself, "He's just busy. The city keeps people busy." She believed it because she had to. Belief was all she had left. Life in the forest continued its slow rhythm. Mary aged like the trees, steady, rooted, marked by time. Her hair turned silver, her back curved slightly from years of labor. But her eyes still carried light. Every morning she walked to the river to fetch water. Every night she whispered a prayer into the fire. "Keep him safe, Lord. Wherever he is, keep him safe." Daniel became quiet and thoughtful, often helping travelers who got lost in the woods. Sam, still full of laughter, would joke, "Mama, you've got more gray hair than the moon's got craters." She'd chuckle. "That's what happens when you raise 3 wild boys." The villagers' tone had changed over the years. They no longer called her the mad woman. Now they said, "That's Mary, the one who never gave up." Some even came to her for advice or for a warm bowl of her famous forest stew. She had become, without knowing it, a quiet legend. The woman who survived, the woman who turned nothing into home. But even legends get lonely. One cold evening, Daniel returned from the nearby town with a piece of news. He had seen a man, a stranger, who claimed to know an Eli from years ago. The man said Eli had been working hard moving between cities. No one knew where he was now. For Mary, that was enough, a spark in the dark. She smiled for the first time in months. "See," she told her boys, "I told you he's out there. He's just finding his way." But as Daniel watched her face glow in the firelight, he wondered if his mother's faith was the only thing keeping her alive. Winter came again, sharp and unforgiving. Mary's hands trembled when she tried to light the fire. Her knees ached from years of walking the rough soil. But still, every evening she set a fourth bowl by the fire. Sometimes she'd whisper to it, as if speaking to her son, "Eli, you still like your soup with herbs, right?" Then she'd smile softly and eat alone. That ritual became sacred, a quiet defiance against despair. Have you ever met someone who waits not out of hope, but out of love? That was Mary. Hope changes over time. It softens, becomes quieter, but never dies completely. It hides in habits, in the way she folded Eli's old blanket, or in the way she left his space untouched, as though he might walk through the door any minute. Sometimes she'd sit outside the shack at dusk, listening to the river, and talk softly to the trees. "You've seen many winters, haven't you? Tell me, does waiting ever get easier?" The trees, of course, never answered. But they kept her company. As years passed, her world grew smaller. The walk to the market became longer. Her eyesight dimmed, her breath shortened. Daniel took more responsibility, trading, fishing, caring for her. Sam started visiting the town for work, leaving home for days. And slowly, the house that once echoed with children's laughter became still. But one thing never changed, the fire. It burned every night, small but steady. It was Mary's promise that when her boy came home, he would still find warmth waiting. One rainy afternoon, Mary sat by the window, staring at the soaked earth. She held the tin box of letters, now faded and fragile. Her hands trembled as she opened the lid. She read the last one again, the ink smudged, but the words still alive. "Mama, I'll come back soon, I promise." Her eyes filled, and she whispered, "I believe you, my son. Even now, I believe you." That evening, Daniel returned early from the forest. He noticed the light of the fire flickering lower than usual. Mary was sitting still, her hands resting gently in her lap, her face peaceful. He called, "Mama?" No answer. Her breathing was soft, steady, but her eyes were closed. He touched her hand, still warm, and whispered, "He'll come back, Mama. He'll find you." Mary slept deeply that night. She dreamed of a small boy running toward her through tall grass, laughing, calling her name. She opened her arms wide, and for the first time in years, her heart felt light again. Because even in her dreams, she still waited. And sometimes dreams have a strange way of reaching across time, planting a seed for what's meant to come next. 20 years is a long time to hold on to hope. But for Mary, time wasn't a punishment. It was proof. Proof that love can outlast distance, that faith can survive silence, and that a mother's promise never truly fades. What she didn't know was that far away, in a city full of glass towers and noise, a man named Eli was finally coming home. Because when life has taken everything, the heart still remembers where it first learned to love. Have you ever stood at the edge of time and realized that every pain, every struggle was leading you somewhere beautiful? Have you ever waited so long for a miracle that when it finally arrived, you almost didn't recognize it? The year was different now. The forest had changed, grown taller, quieter. Daniel still lived near the old shack, now rebuilt into a sturdier cabin. Sam had moved to the nearby town, working as a driver for travelers passing through, and Mary, though slower, though smaller, was still there, still keeping her fire alive, still setting one extra bowl at dinner, still whispering the same prayer each night, "Bring him home safe." Then, one morning, after 20 years of silence, the world stirred. A car engine rumbled down the dirt road that led to the forest. No one ever came that far anymore. Daniel looked up from chopping wood, wiping sweat from his brow. He thought maybe it was a trader or a lost traveler, but when the car stopped and the door opened, his breath caught. A man stepped out, tall, well-dressed, but with eyes that carried a familiar warmth. For a moment, time stood still. Then Daniel whispered, barely believing, "Eli?" Eli smiled, his voice low, almost trembling. "Hey, little brother, you've grown." Daniel dropped the axe, stumbled forward, and pulled him into a hug that broke 20 years of distance in a single heartbeat. When Mary heard voices outside, she thought she was dreaming again. She reached for her shawl, walked to the doorway, and froze. Her hands trembled, her lips parted. It was him, her boy, older, stronger, face weathered by life, but those same eyes, the ones that used to look up at her across the firelight. He stepped toward her slowly, as if afraid she'd vanish if he moved too fast. Then he knelt at her feet. "Mama," he whispered, "I came home." Mary couldn't speak. Her tears fell before her words could. She touched his face the way she used to when he was small. Her hands traced the lines of his cheeks as if confirming he was real. Then she laughed through her tears. "I told them you'd come back." "They said I was crazy, but I told them. My boy keeps his promises." Eli smiled, tears streaming. "I'm sorry it took so long. Life, it took me places. I failed, I fought, I learned. But every time I looked at my hands, I saw yours, and I remembered why I had to keep going." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small pouch. Inside were keys. He pressed them into her palm and said softly, "These are for you, Mama. A new house, in town. No more cold winters, no more cracked walls. You deserve peace." Mary stared at the keys, her fingers trembling. "I don't need a house, Eli. I have one." He smiled gently. "Then think of it as shelter for all the years this one protected us." Daniel and Sam watched quietly, their eyes wet but proud. Sam broke the silence first. "So this is what city folks look like, huh?" Eli chuckled through tears. "No, little brother, this is what home looks like." The next few days felt like spring returning after a long winter. Eli stayed, helped prepare the cabin, cooked with Mary, told stories of his struggles. He had worked in factories, slept on streets, built small businesses that failed, and one that didn't. He learned hunger, loneliness, and humility, but every step, every lesson carried his mother's voice. Her words from the forest still guided him. "Don't let hardship make you cruel. Don't forget where you came from. Always leave a place better than you found it." He had done exactly that. One evening, they sat by the fire again, all three brothers and Mary together for the first time in decades. Eli handed her a folded paper, an official document. "It's yours," he said. Mary squinted, reading slowly. It was a deed. He had bought land, not for himself, but for her. And on that land, he had already begun building something, a small community kitchen where anyone in need could come and eat. He called it Mary's Table. Her lips trembled as she read the name aloud. "Mary's Table! You built this?" "It's where I'll feed others the way you fed us, even when you had nothing." Mary looked at her sons, their strong faces lit by firelight, and whispered, "All these years, I thought I was teaching you how to survive, but you were learning how to love." That night, as the stars filled the sky, she sat outside alone for a while. The forest hummed softly, the same old trees, the same old river. But it didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt alive again. She looked up and whispered to the heavens, "Thank you for keeping my boy safe. Thank you for bringing him home." Time didn't stop for them, but it slowed. Enough for laughter to echo where silence used to live. Mary moved into the small home Eli built, close enough to the woods that she could still hear the river. Every week she visited Mary's table, greeting villagers, sharing food, telling stories. People would whisper, "That's her, the woman from the woods, the one who never gave up." She would just smile and say, "No, dear, I just kept walking, that's all." Daniel became a teacher. Sam managed the kitchen that fed dozens of families each week. And Mary, she spent her mornings tending a garden, her afternoons humming by the window, and her evenings watching sunsets melt over the hills. The pain that once haunted her now felt distant, not forgotten, but transformed. She had learned that the past doesn't have to disappear, it just needs to be forgiven. One night, as she sat outside under the stars, Eli came and sat beside her. They didn't speak for a while. The forest whispered like an old friend. Then Eli said softly, "Mama, do you ever think about that night, the one we ran through the storm?" She smiled faintly. "Every day, it was the night I stopped being afraid." "Me too." They sat in silence for a long time, two souls shaped by hardship, now resting in peace. Mary leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "I always knew you'd come home. I just didn't know when." Eli smiled. "And I always knew you'd still be waiting." The fire cracked softly nearby, like the heartbeat of the forest itself. And in that golden light, a lifetime of struggle turned into something beautiful, a quiet, steady peace. Because sometimes the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who keep walking through the dark, carrying the light quietly in their hearts, the ones who love without expecting, who give without counting, who wait without resentment. Mary was one of them. A woman who turned pain into strength and silence into song. Her story wasn't about luck or miracles, it was about faith that refused to die. And maybe that's the truth we forget too easily. Even when life buries us in sorrow, the roots of hope keep growing underneath. Because hope can rise even from the darkest times. Now, if you like the story, hit the like and subscribe button. Comments. How many of you are waiting for your children?